with Greg and Richard right here on Talking Red.
Nottingham Forest have announced the appointment of Sean Dyche as the club's new head coach. And as expected, he will be joined by his experienced coaching team of Ian Woan and Steve Stone. Both, of course, former Nottingham Forest players who together made over 400 appearances between them for the Reds during the 1990s. Sean Dyche will take charge of his first match on Thursday night as the Reds take on FC Porto in the Europa League. And so, welcome to Talking Reds, a Nottingham Forest podcast hosted by myself, Greg Oram, and my fellow Forest fanatic from across the Atlantic, the hot hand, Richard Spray. Our guests for this one are Steve Battlemuch and the Statman Danscape, and Sean Dyche is now swapping Rock City for the City Ground. It's time for Dyche, baby.
Sean Dyche.
The last 30 seconds, Sean Dyche has arrived here at Nottingham Forest training ground. The plan, I was told yesterday, was for the Dyche deal to all get completed. Terms were agreed late on Sunday night, but it wasn't confirmed yesterday. But like I said, in the last couple of seconds, Sean Dyche has arrived.
Sean Dyche. Sean Dyche. Sean Dyche. Sean Dyche.
Just in case you missed it, it's Sean Dyche. Well, the news broke that it was going to be him yesterday, and no announcement was made. We've got a theory behind that, and we'll come to that shortly. But it was made today, and so we now have a new gaffer in place, Richard Spray. Good morning to you, sir. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing really good. I'm excited that the nostalgia I would feel when watching Everton play and seeing those guys on the sideline, and wondering how much fun must it be to have those team meetings and have those guys together and see that kind of that camaraderie and that that connection that they have. And then now we get to witness that on our sideline too, and bring back one of the best left foots we've ever had in our club into the dressing room, right? And Stevie Stone, right, as well. I mean, it's just a great nostalgic time, I think, for us as a fan base. So definitely feeling the new manager bounce already, and we haven't even kicked a ball yet, but that's okay.
I should say as well that thanks to Jimmy, because I've nicked his artwork as usual from Nottingham Forest. There it is again. The way they kind of strolled into the training ground. I said it to you off air, but Dyche and there's Woan and Stone behind him. I refer to it as like the special teams that have landed, and the feel-good factor is already there. I got excited seeing that. I hadn't felt that in any of the last 5-6 weeks. I felt a buzz. I was like, come on, let's do this. And really, really good. If you are with us in the comments, then please do let us know you're here. We want to hear your thoughts on the appointment of Dyche and his team coming in to save the day at Nottingham Forest. Let us know what you're thinking, and please do go ahead and hit like and subscribe.
We're super grateful for your support. Please hit like and subscribe. Or if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, you can follow us to be sure to never miss a Talking Reds episode.
Yesterday afternoon, there was some sad news that was breaking. And so it's only right and fair that we mention Stuart Pearce. The death of his son, Harley, aged 21, is a tragedy. And as a father, I personally felt it in that moment because it's Stuart Pearce, because of what he means to us, because of how much we love him. And so our hearts go out to Stuart Pearce in this moment. Losing Harley in such a tragic way is something that is truly devastating. And so Stuart Pearce, Liz, his former wife, and Chelsea, their daughter, we stand with you in your grief. Okay, sorry about that, guys. I just felt it quite strongly in that moment. Sean Dyche becomes Nottingham Forest's 41st permanent manager He's the 8th manager of the Marinakis era, and he's the first English manager we've had since Mark Warburton. So just a few little facts there for you guys. Good morning, Danscape. How are you feeling about things this morning?
How am I feeling? I guess I feel a bit like everybody else in that there's a bit of a reset, and it's a nice reset and all that. I feel like I'm the guy who's probably, on the other end of it a little bit, which makes me feel bad because I don't want to be the sort of I don't know, the naysayer to all the positivity that's going on. But I'm in the middle, basically. I'm in the middle somewhere. I get it. I feel it. I feel the nostalgia. I'm not sure how much that translates to 20-something-year-old footballers who are, doing different things these days and all of that. But hopefully it comes through from the stand and the crowd and all that, and kind of translates into what we want, which is, a reset and a refresh and something to get behind. And obviously there's a massive chance for that on Thursday this week to, completely, banish the last 8 games of memories. That's the main aim at the minute.
And Steve Battlemuch with us. You joined us on Sunday night when we reflected on the Chelsea game and the Ange sacking, and we thought about who it might be. And you were making the call saying, look, get Dyche, get him in on Monday morning. I think maybe the club chose to delay the announcement because of the sad news surrounding Harley Pierce. And I think that's the right thing to do. Ultimately, we knew it was happening. Steve, how are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I think it was inevitable. Once it came out that the talks had stopped with Mancini, I personally never thought Silva would be an option, because I didn't think, whether he would want to come or Fulham would let him go, or the club would stump up what ended up being talked about in the Athletic as 15 million to release him sort of 6 months before his contract's up anyway. It started to seem inevitable. And I think that, let's be honest, if anybody had thought that Sean Dyche was going to be leading us out against Porto when we came off having beaten Brentford 3-1 in August, you'd have been taken away and examined for not having the spot. But, it's classic, isn't it? It's we are where we are. And I had sort of got myself into the Dyche spot early because I didn't think there were many other options. I didn't think we were going to get a manager that was in work. And of all the other names being touted around by agents, none of them filled me with a great amount of hope. Mancini would have been a risk, I think, in terms of he hadn't managed in the Premiership since Man City. And I didn't know much about the temperament issue apparently he's got, but when people are saying on TV, well, he used to argue with the coach driver, I kind of thought, well, how's that going to end up with Marinakis? So I'm happy to get on board with Team Dyche. I think it will be good for us in the short term. I think he's going to have the best group of players he's ever had to work with, and so he's got a really tough start. I'm sure we'll come on to that. It's got a really, really tough start for his couple of games. It's not going to get much harder than Porto at home and Bournemouth away. But I'm reasonably happy compared to where we could have been. And the only gripe I've got is that we left it another game and didn't do it over the international break. Yeah.
Good morning to Jackie Howard. She's with us. And also Tim Easom is with us. He's talking about the fact that neither Nuno or Ange seem to have played the new players that were brought in. Well, that's possibly fair. I mean, some played more than others. Brucey over in Texas, good morning to you as well. I mean, Richard, is it right to say that it had to be Sean Dyche going down the line of, well, look, if it's not going to be a manager that's in work, and I think that became evident it wasn't going to be someone we had to pay money for. They didn't want to have to do that. And from what I've read, Marinakis doesn't like paying compensation for managers. So those that are available, it had to be Sean Dyche, didn't it? It had to be him. There was no other name really that was going to match up. And given that we are where we are, we find ourselves in a situation that none of us saw coming, and we've said that time and time again, it had to be Sean Dyche, didn't it?
It seems so. I think when you weigh out all the factors, I mean, you can't diminish the fact that as well that he does 10 matches. He does live in the city. He does. He's committed, I think, in that manner. While he didn't play a ton of time, obviously, as a Forest Academy player, the reality was he did have a chance to, ascend up through the ranks and to be influenced by Brian Clough. I mean, so there's just aspects of who he is, and I think that when you think about just the nature of how he operates, it's with grit, it's gutsy performances, it's physicality, it's these things that I think we're lacking a bit. And so it's not exclusive to his connection to the club, really, as well as obviously his coaching staff. I think it's the way he manages his players and the way that he wants them to play on the pitch. And I think he's going to demand the best out of them, right? And he's gonna want to see their maximum performances as much as humanly possible. I'm sure every manager to a degree is going to do that, but I think he's got a bit of he's got the arm around him sort of concept approach to things, but he's also got, I think there's a tough love thing I could see coming from him as well. And so our players need that. We need they need a little kick up the backside, I think, in some ways. And so having a guy like that come in and while, his winning percentage is what it is, he averages 1.3 points in the Premier League. We were in a circumstance where we needed to get points, obviously, and we need to be difficult to, I know a lot have said this, but difficult to beat, especially on the back end of the pitch. And he kind of ticks all those boxes for a guy who's available. And to Steve's point, to your point, I just don't see anybody out there. Maybe there was a whole series of names that we're just not aware of that were on the board for Marinakis and Edu potentially, or Sorianos, and it just, we'll never know. But it does seem like he checks the boxes that we need at this time. And I think his history with Everton, especially in a difficult situation with points deduction, where you're really fighting for every point to ensure that you stay in the league, even though that wasn't on him. He didn't control that aspect of it necessarily. He's been there, he's been in the trenches, and so he kind of knows when you're in a difficult situation how to operate through potentially being in a relegation battle. Hopefully that won't be the case in a few matches from now. Hopefully we'll turn the tides. But at least we know he's kind of managed that situation and how to keep his players motivated so you don't end up getting relegated in a very difficult circumstance. So yeah, I mean, I like all those aspects of him, and it just seems to balance all the needs at this time for our club.
Indeed. And so the club tweeted out a lengthy statement this morning. It wasn't just welcome to Nottingham Forest Sean Dyche. They went ahead by saying, and here it is on screen, that they are delighted to confirm the appointment of Sean Dyche as the club's new head coach. They wanted to point out that it was thorough recruitment and it was led by Eddie Gaspar and George Sirianos. So those two have had a heavy hand in this. They wanted to go further and say that the former Forest youth player joins the club on a contract running until the summer of 2027. They talk about his first match being the Porto game. This is important, I think, to a lot of Forest fans, which is that Dyche will be joined by Ian Woan and Steve Stone. They talk about them being players or former players that have notched up over those 400 appearances between them. They wanted to go a bit further still and talk about Dyche being a respected Premier League manager. They wanted to talk about bringing a perfect blend of character, tactical acumen, and proven achievement to guide the club through its next chapter. They talk about him having managed more than 330 league matches in his career to date. They say Dyche has built teams defined by defensive organisation, resilience, and strength from set pieces. Qualities that align closely with the current squad's attributes and the club's footballing identity. As a former youth player who lives locally, living locally, knowing the club, knowing the city, Dyche also has a deep understanding of the values and pride of Forest and its supporters. With his character, tactical acumen, and management skills, his appointment represents the best opportunity for successful competitive season, across both domestic and European competitions. I mean, it's a very interesting statement, Danscape, and you kind of, you're on the fence. And I think, forgive me if I'm putting words into your mouth and your thoughts out here. You can correct me. It seems like you are saying, or have been saying, well, look, come on, the stats clearly guide you quite a lot. And we're going to get to that in a moment. But also, the fact that these guys know Forest. That was 30 years ago. The club is a very different club today, and how much does that really come into it? So, I mean, keen to kind of get your thoughts more on that, and correct me if I'm wrong with what I've just said. But also on this bit where they say Dyche has built teams defined by defensive organisation, resilience, and strength from set pieces. Now, I can't imagine or can't think of another time that a club has kind of gone to the lengths they've gone to in this statement. What are they trying to say here? Are they having a dig at Ange and how he just didn't match them? Are they kind of like holding their hands up and saying, we got it wrong and now we're putting it right? What are they saying there, Dan, in your eyes?
It is interesting. It is another strange way of going about things that probably didn't need saying. And everyone knows that, don't they? It's not something that's surprising anyone, like it's an unknown manager from Europe where we don't understand his style of football. So I don't know. Are they trying to reflect what the players have sort of suggested? I mean, it's almost like after that meeting that they supposedly had the other night, is it that the players have kind of said, well, this is what we want as a group of players. This is what we're after. We want to kind of revert back to something more like that. Maybe it's
they're trying to get buy-in from the fans. Do you think? Are they trying to say, for those that are on the fence, like yourself,
a little bit,
that aren't into Dyche, saying, well, look, we recognise we're in the shit. We recognise set pieces have been a problem, and we're now telling you this is the guy to come and fix it. Are they getting buy-in from the fans, do you reckon, as well?
Maybe, but again, everyone kind of knows that. Nobody that's following Forest wouldn't understand that Sean Dyche is going to bring defensive resolve and good set pieces and all of that. So it is a strange one to really make it out. I mean, the strangest bit is the idea that it's being led by Edu and Sirianos, to be honest, because I mean, the whole premise of Edu coming in is that he's kind of going to take us to the next level of recruitment and finding people and players and managers and connections and all that stuff. And he's kind of brought in the guy that literally any of us on this panel would have probably put on the shortlist in this situation, hasn't he? So it's hardly that's the bit that I suppose I'm questioning is we're trying to again be an elite club and do all these things a certain way, and that's not how we're acting. That's not really how we're acting. We're acting like we probably run the club, I suppose. This is the kind of decision we'd make, and it's gonna help with the fans. It is going to help with that relationship and build that up. My question mark is just on the record. His record is good, and I think he's sort of underrated for what he's done. But when you look into his record, he has also had some long runs of bad results, at Everton and teams like that, where, at the end of the day, all the other stuff about his connection to the club and Woan and Stone and all that, it won't last through a run of, 10 games without a win, say. So it's still going to come down to the same things at the end of the day. After you get a few weeks into it, against Porto on Thursday night, if we lose in the last minute 3-2, you're still going to have a bit of that sapped out of it. So it's still going to come down to results at the end of the day. This sort of bounce will last a little while. And I think he can, I think he can deliver results. It's just over that longer period of time. And I suppose it depends how far into the mire you think we are already this season, as to what we could potentially have achieved if there was a better sort of rounded candidate that could do a bit more progressive in terms of what we want to do as a club, as opposed to just dealing with the short term is I suppose where I have my concerns. But it's nothing against Dyche as a manager and as a person and all that. I think he will give us a lift and a refresh. It's just that medium term where we get on.
What do you make of the statement, Steve? And why do you think that the club have kind of got a bit further with the way they've announced Dyche? And I always think as well that any new manager that joins a club arrives with something I call new manager credit. New manager credit in the bank. No one arrives, I don't think, and everyone's expecting it instantly on the first game. I think Ange had a level of new manager credit that quickly evaporated. How much new manager credit does Dyche come with, knowing that we are up against it a bit? We haven't won a game since the opening game of the season, and throwing into the mix the fact that everything we've said about him and his connections to the club and Woan and Stone, does he get a little bit more new manager credit, do you reckon?
I think he will get some from the fans. I think, apparently almost all the tickets have gone there for Thursday when a couple of days ago there was still a lot left. To me, there's a couple of things that the statement says, which I think are quite important. One is he's got 2 years rather than a year. Now, we know contracts mean nothing. And we get to next May, and if we've had a dire season under him, he'll be gone, won't he? But I think for his own pride, he needed to. And reading between the lines, I suspect if he'd have agreed a contract to the end of the season, he'd have been in during the international break, because I think talks were already going off. The fact that he was holding out for a longer contract, I think then they thought, well, if we're going to give a slightly longer contract, let's look at who else is out there. And then it escalated a bit. Now, to me, I think, it would have been a bit of an insult to him to say, we just want you to come in on a contract till, May, and then we'll see how we go on. So he's got something to work at, because he now knows he not only if he keeps us up, but keeps us up sort of mid-table, makes a run in the Europa League, there's a feel-good factor about the club. He'll probably start next season. So, let's see where we are. I think I was a bit surprised that they sort of laid it on thick in the announcement, and they've done the same with Woan and Stone, haven't they? They are clearly trying to build some PR back.
Yeah,
the club has not done itself any favours since the summer. The row with Nuno, which I'm sort of coming around to the fact that sort of Nuno did some of that, or quite a lot of that himself. He signed the new contract when he knew Eddie was coming in. He criticised the owner before a ball had been kicked. He then doubled down on it the week after he won the first game. So I sort of wonder how much Nuno wanted out. Now, we will never know what was going off behind the scenes. But if we were going to change managers, it would have been better to change. If we'd have known Nuno was going to go, or he wanted out, or the relationship had broken down, why didn't we change to somebody more expansive in the summer and give them the pre-season and give them some control over who was coming in? That didn't happen. Then we rush into Ange again. Is that because a relationship had been built up between the owner and Ange outside of Forest, and suddenly thought, oh God, he might win us a cup? It seemed. I don't know anybody who thought Ange was a good idea, even, and I argued strongly right to the end, virtually, to keep giving him a chance. But, it was obvious it just wasn't going to work. So I think that the statement is an attempt to build some rapport back up with fans. I think that will happen, and I think it will happen quickly, and it'll happen even more quickly if we get a few decent performances. I think the interesting stuff will be squad selection, squad rotation. Who's in? Does he change the captain? Does Gibbs White get benched at any point? He's going to have a look at this squad quickly over a couple of games, and then he's got a few days before Man U, and then he's got Man U, Graz, and Leeds. So it's a big baptism of the next 5 games. I think we'll know a hell of a lot more after those 5 games about where the season's going.
It's a tough start, Richard, because Porto come into the City Ground. We'll talk about them soon, I promise, because we are going to be previewing the game. Tough start. Away at Bournemouth on a Sunday. I mean, they're flying high, and they're our bogey team. And we're going away from home where we lost 5-0 last season. Then we got Man United at the City Ground that we'll be at, which can't wait for. But Man United are looking potentially like they're coming together. They just beat Liverpool at Anfield, so they're going to be, looking to follow that up with a victory this weekend and then one against us. It's a tough start, Richard. And so I talked about that new manager credit in the bank. So, what's going to be acceptable from your point of view over those kind of first 3 or 4 games? What, in your eyes, is an acceptable outcome in terms of, obviously, we want to win all 3 games or 4 games, but where are you at in terms of something that's kind of more acceptable? What happens if we lose all 4?
I mean, if we lose all 4, I don't think there's much of a shift. It's not like we're going to go to a 4th manager in a season. So, I mean, I think you kind of have to run with it and allow him to, I wouldn't say bed in, because as I said, I think the transition back to something that we're a little bit more accustomed to won't be as severe. But I would say that, if you can get a point at Bournemouth, I think that would be a brilliant away draw, given the circumstances of what you just mentioned. I mean, clearly I would like nothing more than to see us absolutely obliterate them by some miracle. Because I won't go there.
Let it out. Let it out. It's okay.
My disdain for Bournemouth is quite high. Although I love their manager, of course. Yeah, I would say if you can get a couple of points, you know, you can get a win at Porto. I think I wouldn't say it's a must win, but it feels sort of in that vein because and it's easy to kind of drift towards this. Oh, we'll just put in a good performance and that'll be what matters, right? But I think getting a draw from that will be a big deal because something like that, because it'll allow for some momentum to be regained. And I mean, let's not, you know, mince words. I mean, we've got to start getting some positive movement in that competition. Otherwise, we're going to be pushing ourselves out of it fairly quickly because those games will come as many will say thick and fast, and we've got to start to put ourselves in a position to advance. And I think that's another difficult game given where their record has been this season, which I'm sure you'll talk about, Greg. You know, was it 10 wins out of 11 or something like that? So they're in incredible form in their league. So yeah, I would say get a point out of that. If you can get a point out of Bournemouth, great. I think that gives you something to start to build on. It gives you, I mean, points always matter, right, in any situation, and that's what he's been good at, which is just to find a way to get points. That's kind of been his mantra. So I think getting a couple of points out of those 4 games, while I'd love to see, you know, something more akin to 4-5 points out of those games, it would be fantastic. But I'm setting my bar low so I don't get, you know, and I'm not going to be disappointed if we lose all 5 necessarily. Well, we will be, but I won't be looking at the sky is falling scenario because I just know that it is going to take a little bit of time. I mean, if we're screaming that 8 games isn't enough time, I would say 5 is clearly not enough time for a manager to come in and put his imprint onto the team. So, but I tend to believe that there's going to be a shift here. I think it's going to happen a little bit quicker. I just think there's going to be a different energy about the club.
Yeah.
Now that he's come in.
Yeah. My own feeling is that if he implements his style of play that we expect with that more defensive approach, perhaps the players that are at the club will be able to kind of readapt back into that shape because they did it so well under Nuno. So maybe their transition into his style might be quite effective in terms of how quick they do it. What I want to see, what I think we need to see, is just more defensive organisation and a more solid back line. And if that means that they are now going to, you know, more of a low block, mid to low block, you know, definitely that's going to help them not get caught out from behind. And I think that we just need to see his fingerprint start to take shape on this team. Darren Waplington's in the comments. He thinks that it's a really good appointment, a great appointment, he calls it, even though some of the other podcasts don't want to think that way. He thinks Dyche is going to galvanise the team. William Webb says he likes Dyche as a person, listened to him on a podcast previously, just doesn't like his style of play. Even though we got a better squad than Everton, we should beat Porto, surely. Pat Brett says, in all honesty, I believe this is a backward step. I don't like Dyche ball. I think football is progressing beyond that. So, Pat, you know, clearly not a fan of Dyche coming in. And so there is a little bit of division, I guess, in terms of opinion and style of play, Danscape. So over to you to give us a little bit of an insight that you've gleaned into Dyche.
I'm a Statman.
Fazendo som, Pedrinha Moraes fazendo som, e Pedrinha Moraes fazendo som.
Willie Bolly's stacking up the Forest managers in his Forest career,
isn't he? I mean, in his prime, he's a definite Sean Dyche player, isn't he? It's a shame he's probably not quite there, right? So,
yeah. What have you got for us?
So, what I've got for you is, let me just put this up onto full screen. We have got a comparison of some stats, some numbers between Sean Dyche, Ange, Nuno, and Steve Cooper in the Premier League. Sean Dyche, I've just looked at the period where he was at Everton, which is probably more comparable to where we are than what he had at Burnley. Ange obviously covers Spurs and Forest. Nuno's just at Forest, and Steve Cooper was Forest and his brief spell at Leicester. And so there's numbers against things like goal difference, expected goal difference, possession, and so on. And it's just to see whether it backs up our opinion of what we think Sean Dyche brings. And I would say for the most part it does. And the ones I've kind of highlighted to talk about would be So, possession being one that we talk about, and he's averaged 40% possession at Everton, which is somewhere between what Steve Cooper and Nuno managed. Yeah, so it's right in the mix there. Nothing like what we've seen recently, even though we saw that to some extent under Nuno as well in those first few games. So it'd be interesting to see whether we really do drop off on the possession stats now that Dyche is in, or whether he's got a different way of kind of operating as well. The goals for, right? So, I suppose that's always been the concern with Dyche, is that these teams didn't score enough goals, and his Everton's team were averaging just under a goal per game, whereas at Forest, Nuno was, say, 1.5 goals a game, and Ange's record is 1.7 goals a game. So it is more like where we were with Cooper from what Dyche showed at Everton. Goals minus expected goals. So in terms of finishing, this is perhaps where you would say, okay, let's give him a bit of a boost for what he did at Everton, because his players or his team were underperforming the expected goals there, right? So that underperformance is worse than we've seen at Forest since we've been back in the Premier League, and obviously much worse than we saw last season, where we were converting our chances. So maybe he can look to the fact that Chris Wood is going to be a better finisher than Beto, that he had to rely on at Everton. I suppose things like that might be the difference here that get the goals going in. And then a few bits on style. So like crosses into the box, he ranks the highest on there, which again you might expect. So quite direct. Long passes, similar to Steve Cooper style at Forest. Set piece impact, highest on the list by a little bit over what Nuno managed at Forest. And then goals against is the best on there, right? So defensively, even better record than Nuno managed his whole time at Forest, and much better than we saw under Ange and Cooper. And that's reflected in the expected goals against. It's reflected in the goalkeeping performance at Everton. Very good goalkeeping performance you got out there. And of course, the bottom one, set piece vulnerability, is the lowest on there, right? So 12% of opposition free kicks and corners turn into a shot on goal, basically, versus what we've averaged is like 13% over those other managers. So I think the numbers do back up what we know of him, right? That's what I would say, unless anyone's got anything that they see on there that seems a bit different.
So how much? I mean, you touched on it, Dan. And I mean, how much does the talent level and the sort of options that he had available to him? Because I don't know what maybe you're going to talk about it, but I don't really know I don't recall what his rotations look like and how much depth he really had and what his wing talent looked like. And I mean, it seems like at least it's been thrown out there that he's going to have a lot more at his disposal under Forest, and maybe that can provide a little bit of uptick in some of these metrics when you think about what he can utilize versus what he's had at his disposal previously.
Yeah, I mean, we know he's got a better front line here, right? You've got Chris Wood, who we know can, and hopefully under Dyche as well, he's proven in the past that he can be the clinical striker, more so than what Dyche probably had at Everton in Calvert-Lewin and Beto. And then on the wings, you've just got so much depth and option here, right? We spent 100 million quid on wingers or whatever it is. So he's definitely got better options here than he would have had at Everton. I mean, at times he had Anthony Gordon, which is a good option, but then he seemed to prefer like Jack Harrison at Everton, didn't he? He was very much a functional kind of winger, doesn't have the pace to really take people on. So there has to be more in an attacking sense in this squad for him to work with, which is definitely a big positive. So the other bit I did was just look at the sort of normal team comparison. This should keep Brucey happy in the comments there, because we have got the S Housery rating up on the screen.
Shit out.
There we go. I was waiting for that. So yeah, look, style wise, not too dissimilar. But what the things I would point out is Sean Dyche's Everton side actually much more front foot than we were last season, right? So their pressing score and their kind of pitch territory. This is Everton in 23-24 when he had a full season. And this is us last season. So, they will push on the pitch more than we did. They won't just sit back in the same way we kind of did last season. It's very much, yes, we're good at defending our box, but we will also put a bit more pressure on and step up the pitch, right? So that's one that stood out here. I suppose entertainment value is slightly lower. You probably are going to be less entertained than you were last season. He scores at like 100% for the Crazy Gang rating, which is long balls and free kicks and fouls. His S Housery score is actually slightly lower than we were last season, right? 88% versus about 99% for Forest. So you may see something much similar to what we've seen this season. And then his set piece score is slightly higher from that time at Everton. The main thing that stands out is just that the finishing was so bad, right? So I guess that's the glimmer of hope that we've got, is that, okay, the goals weren't flying in, but to some extent that's just because the strikers weren't taking their chances. Now, on the flip side of that is, of course, the fact that we're kind of in that position ourselves right now. So we need someone to come in and deal with that, as opposed to someone that was in a position where they had something similar. But that's what he's got to fix.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. Really kind of telling us what we probably knew, but it's always good to kind of digest it with those charts and just to get an understanding about the comparison between the recent managers at Forest. You are watching along to the Talking Reds. This is a Europa League match preview. So it's now time to focus on Porto, who are coming to the City Ground this Thursday. Raf isn't with us today to do an opposition preview, so I've taken on the mantle myself. I am going to kind of I've written some stuff up, so I'll kind of go through it and try and keep it concise. But they have really started well this season, as Richard alluded. I think 10 games won out of 11. They sit top of the league in Portugal. They've made some good signings like Borja, Sainz, and Gabri Veiga. They bring a more direct, progressive attacking midfield and wide play into the team. The club have refreshed the squad, as I say, with several younger talents and foreign acquisitions, suggesting a transition phase in style and personnel. So we've got to respect their key players and danger men. Pepe, a Brazilian winger, has got pace and directness. He's on big wages as well, apparently. So, he's come in and he's a key figure for them. Gabri Veiga is a midfielder with flair and offers goal threat from deep. The club recruited him to add creativity into their style. And Borja Sainz, I think I'm saying that correctly, another attacking addition, offering fresh, wide attacking impetus. At the back, they're solid defensively with Jan Bednarek in their ranks. And Bednarek, of course, brings Premier League experience to them, offering size and aerial threat. Going to need to be alert on crosses or set pieces. You'll remember Bednarek caused carnage playing for Southampton in that game that we almost blew when we went 3-0 up. Got back to 3-2, and I think Bednarek scored one of their goals, if I remember rightly. So we've got to keep an eye out for him. In goal, Diogo Costa does command the backline well. So we want to offer threat from set pieces, but they are very organised. And in the midfield, the duo of Varela and Esquillo will try to control tempo. The Forest midfield will need to invade space between the lines to disrupt Porto's rhythm. And on the wings and up front, Pepe and Samu give pace and physicality. Forest fullbacks and wide midfielders, they must not allow them room to run or play in the 1v1s. Porto have creative outlets in Veiga who will look to exploit half spaces. The Forest defence must stay compact and avoid inviting that. So there's going to be threats coming in from Porto in the shape of likes of Francisco Moura. He's a left back and left-sided player. He's not often highlighted, but he does have the ability to push forward, deliver crosses, upset opponents as well. Another younger defensive player is Zapedro. He's a defender, kind of fullback option who might be used in rotation. Fresh legs, less known. So, he can perhaps cause a surprise if he's selected and will get some game time. I've mentioned Gabri Veiga. They're a midfielder. He's an advanced playmaker. He's quite well known. A lot of opponents might underestimate how central he can become when Porto shift their shape. He links play up and arrives late in the box. And so how should Forest approach the match versus Porto? Well, I think we need to prioritise our midfield compactness and discipline. Porto's creativity from Veiga and their wide players means that Forest should ensure the midfield is tight and the transitions by Porto are prevented. They're going to use their fullbacks quite a lot, so we need to exploit potential space behind them. If Porto do push width and fullbacks quite high, we could use quick counters and overlapping runs from our own wide players to get in behind them. So that would be quite interesting maybe go into more defensive shape, hitting on the counter now under Dyche. We've got to try and control the tempo. We've got to try and avoid falling into Porto's rhythm. If Porto bring pace and flair, Forest should have periods where they can manage and possess the ball and force Porto to play slower and then hit them when they overcommit. And then set-piece alertness. With Porto strengthening their defence and attack, second balls and set plays could decide this game. So Forest need the Dyche effect immediately and once again be well organised, like last season, in defence and attacking dead ball situations. And just finally, Porto do travel with tactical flexibility. They may shift shape, especially in their European fixtures. So we've got to be ready to adapt, for example, from the 4-2-3-1 into a 4-3-3 or something similar. So that's what I uncovered with the assistance of ChatGPT to kind of come with a little bit of Porto analysis for you to kind of tell you that they've won 2 out of 2 in the Europa League. They sit on 6 points. Forest, I think, I just looked on my phone. We're 25th. So we're still in the places where you go into the playoff round with a point on the board. We've only had 2 games in the Europa, right? So how much do you think, Steve, that the Europa, is still prioritised by Forest now? Obviously, we want to do well. We don't want to be embarrassed. We'd like to go as far as we can. But do you think the change in kind of thought processes about the manager's style of play might also make them think, you know what, it's got to be all about the Premier League now?
I think when we looked at the fixtures that we got, Betis away and Porto at home, to me, were the 2 that I thought, God, they're going to be tough. Because, they are teams playing in decent leagues and they're playing in leagues where they're doing well. And that was before Porto had their good start to the season. I mean, they've in the Portuguese league, Porto have won 7 out of 8. The other one was a draw. They've scored 19 goals and only conceded 1. So that's their league form. And like Greg said, they've won 2 out of 2 in the Europa. So Porto will come here knowing that they'll think they can come and win the game. That's for sure. Now, when I looked at Europa League in the summer, it seemed to me that if you wanted to get into the top 8, you had to win 5 out of 8, 4 out of 8 with a lot of a good goal difference. If you wanted to get in that middle section of 9 to 24, where you then go into a playoff, some of them were getting in with 3 wins and a few draws, again, with a good goal difference, because the cut-off points between 8 and 9 and 24 and 25 were determined on goal difference last year. So the Michelin game obviously did for us, really, because Betis was a good point away. I think we get past this Porto game. The other 5 games are against lesser teams, and if we're organised by that point, we should get decent results out of them. So, I mean, I would snap your hand off now for a point on Thursday. I really would. If we came out of that with a point, with a half decent performance, even if we're equalising in the last minute through a own goal, I will take that, because I think Porto will finish in that top 8 as well. Yeah. Whether the club will switch now to the focus is completely on staying in the Premier League, I think will just depend as results go on over time. Because clubs do take that some clubs take that pragmatic approach. Spurs basically said to Ange last year, we're not going to go down, but we want you to win the Europa League, and he did switch tactically to that as the end of the season went on. So I think it would just depend on as results go, but I don't think we should be too down on the fact that it will be a really tough game against Porto. They'll be well organised. And, they'll be coming here thinking they can win, and they're bringing more fans, a lot more fans than Michelin brought, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's an exciting fixture, Richard, because FC Porto, Nottingham Forest, 2 former champions of Europe, playing in another European competition. It's what we wanted so badly for Forest, and what all the fans were so excited about when we got into Europe, whether it was going to be the conference or Europa. I think just getting back into Europe was always going to be something that everyone was going to get so excited about. And it kind of went off the rails a little bit well, not kind of went off the rails a little bit, went completely off the rails with the Michelin result. So we need to get back on track. And what better game to do that? A point, a nice draw in Dyche's first game. Yeah, I think I'd bite your balls off, as I always say, for that right now, I think. Because I think, he's got a tough start. So, what are your hopes for Thursday? What do you want to see from Forest? In amongst all this chat about what Dyche does and how he sets them up and everything else, ultimately he's not on the pitch. There's 11 players on the pitch that have got to execute a game plan. What is it you want to see from that Nottingham Forest team on Thursday night?
Well, I think it's going to be, I guess, just to summarize it initially, I want to see the opposite and give the fans the experience they should have gotten. You guys should have gotten attending the Michelin match, which was to put in a performance that shows, as you pointed out, what does Nuno always used to say, compete. Like you want to see those kinds of elements where we're competing on every level. We're showing that physicality that we know is a calling card. I mean, I know they didn't rate as high as Forest did on the S. Housery scale, but I think when we played Everton, that was always a question, right? Or that was always an anticipation that you'd have to deal with that. And so I want to see that because, as you pointed out, there's some talent. I mean, Samu, I won't even try to say his last name, but I know Paul's a huge fan of his, and he's kind of a Taiwa-esque player, right? He can be difficult to deal with because he's physical, he's quick. He's someone that you have to be cognizant of. So I want to see them be able to for us to control that final third of the pitch in a way that we're used to, and showing that sort of capacity to sort of turn the corner again, not put ourselves in a position, even if we go a goal down, for example, are we going to show frailties? Are we going to show a different type of character and a different type of intensity to keep things in front of us, be able to allow ourselves to succeed and find a way through? Even if it's a 1-1 draw, the reality is that kind of mix or that sort of chemistry would allow for our fans to feel like it made up for in some way what they got when we played Michelin, because that's what Michelin did to us, right? They came in with absolute belief, commitment to the fact that they were going to control the middle of the pitch and they weren't going to let us do anything. They were going to let our creative players have an inch. And so being able to find somewhat of a balance, but be able to show that physicality and not allow ourselves to be bullied off the ball, not allow ourselves to have opportunities to get on the counter and things of that nature, would be great. Just, again, a holistically better performance. And frankly, not just a performance, but, a little bit more of the game in and of itself versus a half that's good and a half that isn't. I mean, it's just continued to be somewhat of an issue for us, even going back to late last season, where we put in a good half, we put in a performance to a degree, but then we just sort of let things slip. Everything sort of dissipates. So not seeing that much of that in this match would make a big difference, I think, and just to bring some positivity to the ground. And they'll be up for it. Everyone who's attending, the energy will be there.
Scoring goals would be interesting, would be nice. That's what we need to do. We need to get some goals on the board. But in terms of FC Porto, Dan, you've got a couple of slides on them as well to kind of like go a little bit more deeper on our opposition as well. So I'll let you bring them up and just take us through what you've discovered in a comparison sense between Forest and Porto.
Yeah, so as you guys have said, a great start to the season. All I would say though is I looked at their other season starts, and they normally win something like 7 out of 10 games, right? Their league is not as competitive, so they do tend to have good runs of results. So it's all relative. Obviously, they've managed to get the job done in the Europa League as well, but they've been quite sort of clinical in that respect. So as a style of team, this season, I've compared them to us last season because I think this is more what we'll see now going forward. And you can see that they are used to dominating the ball in terms of possession, territory on the pitch. And, they provide a bit more in terms of creativity, chance creation, box crashing and pressing and all that than we did last season, which I presume is what we might revert to, particularly for this game. However, what they're not perhaps used to doing is obviously dealing with that kind of Premier League style defending where you're going to have physical forwards, front lines and lots of balls into the box. So I think maybe that's an area where we can still hurt them. And they're perhaps not used to, the quality of our counter-attack if we can get back to what we had last season. One thing I would say is the set pieces score quite highly though. So if we thought Midtjylland was a problem, then their set piece rate is also pretty good so far this season. So yeah, Sean will have his work cut out on that one. Some of the players you touched on, Greg, I mean, Bednarak has started off really well for them in that kind of classic stopper defender role. And he started playing alongside Kiwior now. So two Polish defenders, internationals together in their centre back. And Kiwior plays that slightly more conductor role, like Murillo-esque. So they're quite a good pairing. It's quite smart because they both signed this summer, I think. So quite a smart move to kind of get that pairing together. In their defense, I think I can't remember his first name, but A Costa is got 5 goals and assists. I think they're all assists. I think he's got 5 assists from right back. So he's quite a young Portuguese player to keep an eye on, definitely. And then in midfield, one guy I'd highlight is Froholt. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but he's Danish, young, like 19-year-old player. And he's very good on the ball at carrying the ball. Like if you give him a chance to get behind our midfield, he's very good at just dragging that ball up the pitch and getting him behind. So he's definitely someone to keep an eye on. And then, yeah, Samu up front is scoring like 100% as a mobile striker kind of role at the minute. So he is definitely in that Taiwo mould. And he's the danger man. But behind him, Borja Signs, we were linked to potentially be signing him in the summer for about 15 million quid. So it'll be interesting to see what his level is. And even their backup striker, Luke de Jong, has got an incredible scoring record, but never quite at the sort of Premier League or Big Four league level, really. So they've definitely got good strength and depth. But yeah, I think it's a case of just bearing in mind what their... Have I pressed the wrong? There we go.
It's all right.
It's bearing in mind what their league form is hard to compare to what we hopefully offer.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. The clock is ticking. So I think we now need to put up the FOTMob and have a look at what we might do in terms of setting up ourselves against Porto. The team that is on the screen is the team that started against Chelsea. It was a back three of Murillo, Morato, Milenkovic, Williams and Zinchenko in the wing-back roles. It was a midfield three of Anderson, Sangare, Douglas Luiz, and we had Gibbs White with Tyrell Wanyi up top. So, what are we going to do in terms of team selection on Thursday night? Well, I don't think that Tyrell Wanyi is going to start, personally. I think it will be very much Chris Wood, if I'm honest with you. But, Sean Dyche is going to come in and his selection, we just don't know what he'll do. So this is going to be what we would do. I'll come to you first, Richard, as usual. What is it that you would do on Thursday? What shape, firstly? Do you want to go back three still? Do you want to switch up to 4-2-3-1? Let's talk about shape and let's talk about personnel.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards sort of a probably unexpected utilization of kind of starters that we're used to seeing on our squad, simply because I think he's going to want to get that initial win or draw in this match. And I know we got to bear in mind that there's going to need to be there's a quick turnaround to play a Premier League match. So he's not going to want to use all of his probably the guys that we were most used to seeing in that starting 11. But I would switch to a back four, and I probably would go. I'm kind of leaning towards like a 4-1-2-3 type of thing. You could leave it at 4-2-3-1. That's fine. I think we see on the left, or let's start up top. So I'm going to go Wood up top because I tend to agree with you. I think this is a game that we need to feature him because I think he can be successful. You've got on the right, I'm going to put Bakwa in there. I think it's time to kind of utilize some of these depth pieces that we have and see what we can do with them, what Dyche can do with them. And I think he gives you some defensive ability to drop back into sort of a wing-back role and provide some defensive support on the right side. On the left, I'm going to say Ndoye comes back in for this match because I think we need to utilize him because I have a feeling Callum's going to feature in that match against Bournemouth. And then I'm going to say Morgan's going to be in that 10 position. I'm tempted to put McAtee in there, but I don't think that'll happen. I think he'll go with someone that is a known commodity. Luis, I think, will be benched for this match simply just to rest him and get him prepared for Bournemouth because I think he'll be a good addition for the Bournemouth match. So I would suggest that you put Anderson there and Sangare, or either way. You could put Anderson or Sangare in those two midfield roles. Then in the back, this is where I get a little bit, I start to question. Milenkovic to me feels like an absolute simply because he seems like a Dyche type player, number one. Number two, I would say that he probably fits the mold of trying to limit what Samu can do. So I'm going to say Milenkovic is there. I actually am going to keep Morato in for this. I have a feeling he'll let Murillo rest for the Bournemouth match because you don't want to completely utilize all your normal starters. On the left, I'm going to say Nico features on the left this time. And because I just didn't like what I saw from Zinchenko in the last match. I thought he was very, very poor. And I just don't feel like he's the kind of player that would feature in a Dyche type structure. And exactly, Savona. Because even though he's not got the best aerial dual win rate, he's got some height to him, so he can provide a little bit of support in the box on set pieces. So that's my team. Wood up top, Ndoye on the left, Gibbs White, Bakwa, Sangari, and sorry, my dog is not very happy with this starting 11 apparently. Anderson, and then Williams, Morato, Milenkovic, and Savona in the back line.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to chip in with where I'm at. It's not too dissimilar. I think Douglas Luiz starts, though. I think that he's going to be key for us. I think, to be honest with you, I'm probably really looking at a more of a 4-3-3, though. So I'm keeping Chris Wood in. I'm keeping Morgan Gibbs White and pushing him out onto that right-hand side of a front three. I'm taking Bakwa out. I'm putting Sangari into the midfield. So Sangari, Luiz, and Anderson in that midfield, 3-man midfield, because I think we need to be compact in that midfield area. Gibbs White pushed out to the right, such as when we played against Betis. Chris Wood plays up top. On the left, for me, has to be Callum Hudson-Odoi. I think for me, he's a first choice winger. I think he has to play. It's the back line where it gets interesting. I don't see him dropping Murillo. I just don't see that. I do see, however, an opportunity where this might well be that time where actually Murillo is played at left back. Now, it's probably not going to happen, and there's definitely a call for height needed. So Savona's height is needed potentially with their set pieces. I think Morato's played well this season. Ange definitely liked Morato. He came out and said it a few times. Morato's been comfortable, apart from when he was at left back. Milenkovic starts, that's guaranteed. But maybe that defensive solidity with Murillo, Morato, and Milenkovic, maybe they play. And maybe it is Murillo that plays in that kind of left back role. It's something that I think we've talked about a lot. It's something I wouldn't mind seeing. I think Zinchenko is the player that is going to be at most risk of game time under a Sean Dyche. I think we've seen that defensively he's suspect. It wouldn't surprise me if we saw Zinchenko playing in a midfield role at some point in a certain game or coming on into the midfield, because he is a skillful player and he picks up spaces really well. So it wouldn't surprise me that Zinchenko, because he's played midfield a lot for both former clubs and country, that he gets some game time in that position. Maybe not a starter, but maybe it's in certain games. But in terms of the back line, I've gone with Williams at right back. I'm playing Murillo at left back in this game. Morato, Milenkovic. Once again, it's Sangari, Luiz, and Anderson in the midfield. Up front, Chris Wood. Hudson-Odoi is your out-and-out winger. Gibbs White is your inverted kind of right-sided forward. That's how I'd play it. Steve Battlemuch, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's about what team would I play, or what team would I think that?
Yeah, I want to know what team you'd play. You're the manager. What team would you play?
Well, on that grounds, I'd have Savona at right back, and I'd have Murillo and Milenkovic in the middle, and I'd have Williams at left back. And I think over time, Dyche will probably play Jai Cunha at right back until Ola's fit. So in midfield, it is where I depart. I would have a midfield three of Anderson, Luiz, and Morgan Gibbs White. So I wouldn't have Sangari. And I would sort of have Anderson more in the role he's playing for England, sort of at the back with Luiz and Gibbs White slightly in front of him, but more in the midfield. So Gibbs less as a number 10, but more as a sort of box-to-box midfielder. And then up the front three would then be Callum Hudson-Odoi, and Wood. And I think you've got lots of options then off the bench So it's more like a 4-3-3, with Undoy on that right hand side.
Okay, I was playing around trying to make it work. So you're going with the Dan Ndoye.
Yeah, back up the top.
This is what happens. There you go. So Dan Ndoye. So you're Gibbs White, and then you had. Did you have Douglas Luiz in your midfield? Sorry.
Yeah, I did. Now there's all those arguments about whether we want to, particularly with people like Luiz, manage their game time, and it wouldn't be out of left field, would it, if Yates plays instead of Luiz?
Yeah, I'm thinking that. This could, Yates might be
Sean Dyche,
the one that gets game time.
Yeah. So I think all sorts of things are possible there, and providing we've got enough options on the bench as well, then you could take people off after 60 minutes and change out those wingers, change out the striker, bring fresh legs on in midfield. So I think it's going to be fascinating. I can't wait for team news on Thursday. I'll be in the nav waiting as they read it out, hoping that we're not scratching our heads like we were when we went 5 at the back and Tyler up front against Chelsea.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Steve. Danscape, your team, what are you saying?
I'm saying 4-4-1-1. If you've got that option there, I think this is what we'll get.
4-4-1-1.
Okay. Yeah, and at times it will be a 4-5-1. I think our whole game plan will be to clog up the midfield. I think we're going to see an attempt to just get a result on the board. Basically, we need it, don't we? Really, in this competition. So I think we're going to see that. I think we're going to see pragmatism. Fullbacks won't be bombing forward, all that sort of stuff. So pretty much. So in terms of players, I think you will have Anderson and Yates in the middle. I think obviously you'll have Chris Wood up front and Morgan Gibbs White behind. If you want to shuffle those guys while they're on there. And I think you'll have that pairing of Anderson and Yates. And then on the wings, I think you'll probably see Ndoye on the right and Hudson-Odoi on the left. I mean, it's harder to pick that one position, but I think you'll see Hudson-Odoi on the left. I think he'll go with what he's perhaps seen of Forest, if you like, in recent times, because he'll have watched Forest. And I just think that's what, I think that's just a solid team. At right back, Brucey makes a really good point about Zach Abbott. He could be a winner under Sean Dyche. He could be the kind of player that Dyche fancies to kind of bring into this team as a way to, promote the kind of the bond with the fans and the club and all that. Because I don't think I've seen enough from Savona to think that Zach Abbott would be a massive drop-off or difference. I think Savona probably offers a little bit more on the ball than what we've seen, but not for this game. I think this game's just too early, but in the long run, perhaps we might see that option. But I think that for me is a solid lineup that keeps the game tight. I think we're just looking for a 1-0 home win, and I think that's how we approach it, and then we use the subs accordingly to mix things up, and that's how we line up. And at times, like I say, be 4-5-1 effectively. We'll really try and clog it up. You might drop it to 4-1-4-1. There's different ways of using that midfield then, but I think it's bodies in the middle of the park that he'll look to do.
So you've gone with Nico and Savona in the full-back areas as well, with Murillo, Milenkovic, Hudson-Odoi, Ndoye kind of on the flanks. Yates comes into the midfield alongside Anderson. Gibbs White as an out-and-out 10, really, that can drop in as well. Chris Wood as the out-and-out striker. I mean, we've talked about our squad, and we've talked about the fact that we've got a load of options that it's almost like we're spoiled for choice. Murray Hutchinson's not going to start. We know that much. And you're right to suggest Zach Abbott might come into the thinking at some point. Forgive me if you mentioned this, Dan, or if anyone else knows. What is his usual preferred lineup when he was at Everton, for example? Formation.
Well, at the end it was 4-2-3-1, definitely. Some 4-3-3 in there. But mostly 4-2-3-1 in the end. But early on at other teams, I looked at, he did use that 4-5-1. That's why I've kind of picked that early on against like an Arsenal or someone. He went in with that. So I'm figuring he'll do something.
Does he use 3 at the back, 3 centre backs much or not? Because I still think that there's a case for the back 3 of Morato, Milenkovic and Murillo, but then you've got Savona and Williams kind of tucking in, so you're really solidifying that back line, and putting in front of Sangare and an Anderson and a really kind of not going with wingers. I mean, maybe that's ultra defensively. Maybe he's not going to want to do that in his first game.
Rarely, yeah. Looking at it, rarely. I mean, the last time he used a 5-4-1, they lost 3-0 to Wolves in 23-24, so he's probably not bothered since.
There's lots of you in the comments. Thank you very much. Ross Taylor, I think that's our Ross Taylor of this manor. With a $199 donation for the pot. Thank you very much. He says, who let the dice out? Well, they're all coming out of the woodwork. Who let the dice out? We're rolling the dice, baby. Some people are just not having Sean Dyche in the comments, saying it's a shocking appointment. There was one earlier. I can't remember where it was. Someone said here it is. This from Graham Hedworth. This may not be popular, but I would sooner give my money to my local non-league team than Dyche and the dinosaur tactics. Okay, that's an opinion. Thank you very much for sharing that. We are out of time, so we're going to have to leave it there and let all these opinions kind of float around, and you can join in probably on social media and argue with each other. But I think most importantly, it is time to come together. Steve Battlemuch, any final thoughts before we go?
I think we'll know in terms of the crowd very, very much in the build-up and in Mull Kintyre and the first few minutes that the crowd are back on side. Obviously, that will help if we don't go 1-0 down in 5 minutes. But, I don't get if you call yourself a Forest fan and you don't want us to go out and get some on Thursday and make the best of the season, go and watch your non-league side, mate, and that's fine. But to me, I'm looking forward to it. I think we've got loads to play for. We've got 6 games in Europa League, and we've got the best part of the season. Let's just crack on and get on board.
Score prediction, Steve?
I'm going for 1-1.
Okay, thank you. Danscape, any closing thoughts on that, and also your score prediction, please?
Well, look, I think my score prediction is probably a 1-0 win. Let's just hope. I think that's what we're on course for. Look, I think he's going to provide that bit of separation between everything that's gone before, all the noise, and let's just get on with this game. Let's just come up with a plan to win this game and settle everybody down and get everybody back on side. And that's what he is going to be good at. And I think that's what will happen. I think the crowd will be up for it, as they have been, for the games, even though the games don't unfold the way we want. So, yeah, another exciting night, big game, historic fixture. We'll be there, and looking forward to it.
Fantastic, thank you. And Richard Spray.
Yeah,
finishes off.
I'm with Dan. I think we're going to be rocking all over the world at the end of the match, and we'll be a 1-0 win. Kind of classic Dyche sort of match. Where we show that commitment to the plan. I think there definitely will be a strategy in place, and I think we'll get that victory that we so desperately need. I think the boys will be, up for it. I think we keep using the word galvanized, but I sort of seemingly drift towards that kind of moniker for what I think will happen with our team, and it'll just be great to see the crowd be honored with a great result and a great performance, because like Steve mentioned, they'll continue to fight and be behind the team throughout the process. So I'm thinking 1-0 win as well. I'm going with Dan.
Brilliant. I think that it's really important that we get our identity, and that starts now. And that's what Sean Dyche and Steve Stone and Ian Woan are going to help bring back to Nottingham Forest. On Thursday night, the crowd are going to play a massive part. I know that matches under the lights can be really special. I talk about that quite a lot. I was at Mitchelland, and the buzz beforehand was fantastic. And I think that this is now turning the page and getting that buzz back, with the fans buoyed up to get behind Sean Dyche, his team that he's brought in, and everyone just working together, coming together. I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of the fact that, it's been a really rocky start. So don't expect magic things to happen in an instant. But I do think that new manager bounce, as Richard mentioned earlier, is going to be in full swing. I'm going to go for a 3-1 win for Forest, because this team is full of attacking threat. They know how to attack. They know how to create chances. The only thing that's been missing is putting the ball in the back of the net. So I think we're going to see a defensive rigidness back in our team, but I still think there's going to be chances created, and Chris Wood is going to come back into the party with a brace, 3-1 win for Nottingham Forest. Our season is now underway. Let's enjoy it.
Come join Greg and Richard right here on Dark and Red.